What I'll do for the next 30 minutes is, Kapil mentioned an important point as a takeaway for all of us: rent the model, own the intelligence. The question is, how do you own the intelligence? So I'll spend some time to bring that perspective. I have some interesting demos to showcase. These are my personal experiences. Before I get going, a quick question to all of you. How many of you here consider yourself as AI natives? That means, you know what? You know how to best apply AI in your day in the life at work. You crack the code. Come on. 10 people out of so many here? Yeah, of course. We all learn. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You never reach the destination. It's a journey. So I'm sure all of us are learning in terms of how best to use. And another question, while all of you are here, do you have any of your agents working for you on your behalf somewhere? Good number of hands. That means you have your agents working while you're sitting here. That's a reality? It is a reality, yeah? Okay. Not many believe that, but that's a fact. It is happening as we speak. I would not say it's omnipresent. It is happening as we speak. That means we can have our agents work on our behalf like how we would have worked in the same time while we're doing something else. I have an example to share later. I'll talk about that. But as I'm standing here, yes, there are a couple of agents working on my behalf, doing some grunt work for me while I'm doing this. So this is real. Okay, let's get started. Now, here's the reality. All of us basically spent last 3 years to reflect on how do we converse with AI, right? They said, learn prompt engineering, isn't it? Right? That's what we spent last 3 years because there's a method to converse with AI. And if you don't know the method, we always say AI hallucinates. Yeah, because we blame AI because we don't give right context to the AI and we think AI is making a mistake. Of course, true, but of course, if you the point is we've entered this era where it's no more prompt engineering. It's largely you've entered this era of delegation. That means AI is not telling us ask me anything. AI is telling us task me anything. I'm here to take any task and execute for you. That's reality. Yeah. So from ask me anything to task me anything, of course, we enter this era called art of delegation. That means all of us have to understand not just about throwing questions to AI, but constructing meaningful tasks, because agents are meant to be task solvers. When I said earlier how many agents are working for you, they're actually executing a task on our behalf, right? So I'll showcase one task which I delegated, which meaningfully functioned for me, and a task that I believe that is making us learn, become smart every single day at the Innovation Hub in Bangalore. And I'll take you through that. By the way, this is the task. The task is, just to give you a bit of backdrop here, every single day, every morning, as a team, we huddle. It's a stand-up. It's a daily routine because we're in office because customers visit us. So in the lobby area, we basically talk about, hey, what happened in the last 8 hours while we were sleeping? What innovation happened? Very important because customers come and talk about the same stuff. That means we should be aware. Right? So through the day, we post those questions in a Teams channel in terms of, that fosters a conversation. Of course, we all, away from a desk, talking to customers, etc. End of the day, we want the same knowledge to be distilled amongst us. That means the conversation which are active in Teams channel, can that be presented to me as a podcast while I'm on way back home? I can listen to, what did we discuss this morning? So many people contributed. So many people had their ideas and point of views, right? So can AI do that for me? Absolutely. We'll see that. It's magical, right? So this is basically the task outcome. But between that, this is largely are the steps I told my AI. You know what? You basically organize messages, create a document, go to Microsoft 365 notebooks, create a podcast. While you do a podcast, by the way, bring in some humor. No, don't force humor, okay? Only if there's a need for humor, bring in humor. Otherwise, make sure it's a conversation between two people, bringing our conversation to light via podcast. Yeah? You want to see this? Yeah? So let's do that. So now this is what I'm going to show you, the short recording, by the way. And that's a task, it executes at 4 p.m. every day, while basically the day ends and we're getting back home. While you're driving, you can absolutely listen to this podcast. I've brought in the glimpses of that. We'll see how that actually happens. Now, this is, by the way, is our Teams channel. Look, we're throwing in, for example, a good conversation on open weights, as Microsoft released new security models. All the stuff has been given here. And we basically chit-chat. This is meaningful learning for all of us, right? Now, look, this is yesterday, and now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to trigger my Scout. Scout is, by the way, the first autopilot we released, right? As Microsoft 365 Copilot, we have conversations, we have basically co-work, and we have code, and we also have what we call as Enterprise Claw, which is autopilot, which is for Scout. This is my Scout. I'm putting the same prompt here, and the magic begins from there, right? So now, prompt given, the same thing you saw in the Word document, and my Scout is basically running. Of course, there is a human in the loop at times. It opens, by the way, this task, going to notebooks is not me. AI opening browser, going to notebooks, putting in the document, which is a summary of all the conversation in the Teams channel, and customizing as a dialogue, medium duration, and of course, spinning off a podcast creation task. Not me doing, AI doing it on my behalf, and I'm just sitting quiet and doing something else, and eventually, it posts that podcast onto the same channel so that as we get back home, we listen to the podcast, significant learning. I'm sure all of us believe in short capsules, right? I think that's the best way to learn today. And not 1-hour videos, but 5-minute capsules, right? So let's look at that. This is where AI kind of goes back and posted that particular link back there, saying, you know what? By the way, while AI is communicating, it has to claim it is not Sandeep, it's Sandeep's Scout, right? Because I can always say if some mistake happens, it's not me, it's my Scout. No, never do that, right? It's me. I am accountable. It's me, it's my digital twin doing it, right? So now here is the podcast, that link, and let's look at that. I'm going to basically open that and let's listen to a few glimpses.
Welcome to today's deep dive into some internal tech team recap notes.
Right, and our mission today is really to decode the front line of AI security.
And we're seeing this play out with a recent Microsoft release that Vishaka Arbot flagged in the team notes.
Oh yeah, that one is a bit of a mouthful. I mean, MAI Cyber One Flash inside MDAH.
All right, totally a mouthful. But the real headline there, which...
Right, so this is two people conversing, bringing our topics to light. Let's move forward.
Well, that is the exact fear driving the whole open weights debate that Sandeep brought up.
Right, and he shared Anthropic's current stance, which is, wait, let's clarify the terminology for a second for everyone. Because open weights just means releasing the trained parameters so anyone can run it locally.
Yeah, without the underlying trains.
By the way, in my instruction, I've also told some of the concepts we discuss, go and validate in the open web, bring factual data to me so that we can clarify. Because we didn't converse about what open weights are, right? But for a podcast listener, I should clarify in terms of what does an open weight really mean. Yeah? Let's continue.
As Arvind Raman argued in the notes, it might just be calculated gatekeeping.
Oh, because Arvind pushed back hard on Sandeep.
He really did. Arvind argued that invoking China and national security...
No, by the way, Arvind is right here. He didn't push back at all. It was just a regular conversation. Look, I said AI, bring some humor. It brought in that fashion. He really took on Sandeep. No, he didn't take on me at all. We were having a very friendly conversation. So AI at times exaggerates, right? There's an example of that. But let's move forward. Last part of it.
So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Go for it.
If the defining feature of open weight models is that their safety guardrails can be easily fine-tuned away by whoever downloads them.
Yeah.
Look, this is, if you ask me what can AI do as of this morning, that's what it can do. With no human intervention, ability for it to distill knowledge and make sure it's available to all of us in a meaningful podcast is a reality. Of course, if you look at AI's capability, it's up to your imagination, by the way. I would not limit anything on technology today. It's up to how creative you are in unearthing a business use case which matters most to you, right? Where is enterprise mode? It's not in the model, right? It's largely in the intellect that resides in your company, and we'll see how to manifest that in a meaningful fashion. So now let's move forward. Now, I showed what AI can do, right? When it comes to an enterprise, there's always a gap in terms of what enterprises are manifesting today versus what AI can do. It's called the capability overhang, right? The reality is, as the caption says, AI is, honestly not waiting for the next best model. It's looking for the best enterprise where it can meaningfully apply. That's the reality, by the way, right? Now, I think the best part is, the good news for all of us is, what we think cannot happen today, when you wake up next morning, you'll see the news saying, this AI can do. That means the pace is such that there's a need for all of us to understand the true potential of AI before thinking what we can solve, right? So yes, there's a reality. There's definitely a capability overhang that exists in the enterprises, and effort every single day is to bridge that gap, and that's a relentless pursuit to make sure you transform your company with AI. Of course, become AI-first company. Now, Kapil mentioned this in terms of when it comes to, right now, by the way, if you look at AI, how many of you think, applying AI is a technology problem? Right? It's not a technology problem at all, right? It's largely a business engineering problem, right? There is a no, I said earlier, while all of you here, your agents may be working for you. What does it really mean? Do you trust that agent who is working on your behalf? Right? There's a survey that Microsoft spun off some time back. It's called Worked at Index, right? The survey results came out. It's called 7-11. For all of us to believe AI is beneficial to us, it's helping me as an individual, is if you save 7 minutes of time each day, right? If 7 minutes of time saving, you start believing, you know what, AI is actually helpful. It takes 11 weeks to build trust, right? We talk about autonomy with AI. That will only happen if you trust AI, right? How many of you are comfortable AI making mistakes on your behalf while you're sitting here? Not comfortable at all, right? That shouldn't happen. So that the reality is, no, this transformation talking about is beyond technology. Technology is probably a dot in a larger, I would say, canvas. The bigger puzzle is, how do you capsule enterprise IQ meaningfully? We'll see that, yeah? Now, this is a massive transformation shift. We no more believe in org charts, by the way. It's a work chart, right? What is a work chart? This calendar year, we're seeing agents joining workforce, right? Org chart helps because whenever you basically, if you look at any company, whenever complexity increases, we always go back to the hierarchy to seek approvals. I think AI breaks it significantly because when complexity arises, AI is there to basically mine knowledge, help us make better decisions faster, right? So in fact, at the Innovation Hub in Bangalore, we believe in work chart. We are, if you ask me, what's your collective strength in Innovation Hub? We're a team of 12, by the way. 8 humans and 4 agents working. That's a collective horsepower of Innovation Hub. So any firm going forward will, even in annual returns, they'll claim that this is a collective horsepower, human and agent working for us. Yeah? Now, here's a big question. When you're building an agent, how many of you build agents here, by the way? Agents, you built it and they're running. Okay? Now, let's understand this. When you think about an agent is meant to be a task solver, right? It has basically a workflow behind the scenes. That's your automation task on hand. You also, expect this agent to have certain skills in terms of integration points, MCP access, all the stuff, and it has a persona, right? That means it's meant to behave in certain fashion. This can only be real, by the way. If you don't want to end up in agent sprawl, every agent should be backed by what we call a job description, right? When you hire an employee and hire a human persona, you have a JD, right? Job description. So when you're onboarding a digital colleague, you should absolutely have a job description, which basically consists of these as elements, right? Your focus largely should be to define the JD because, that's where it's almost like a PRD being manifest JD, and JD is a must for you to look at what should my task solver do. Ignore the technicalities because the agent harness that we have today, the platform is matured enough to offer you an agent harness because let me focus on an agent job description. Let the platform take care of its functioning, hosting, scaling, making sure I can observe, evaluate, and meaningfully progress that particular agent in terms of performance. Yeah? So single most, I would say, lesson for all of us in the last few months is you got to have a job description like you have a job description for a human person when it comes to hiring. Because we're talking about hiring or onboarding an agent equal to a human persona, right? Let's move forward. Now, the question is, how do we unlock enterprise intelligence? We talk about the IQ, which is your IQ, which basically is the collective intellect in a company, which is outside the model. Model is largely a brain coming in to help you, infer, but the context engineering is something you own. The context has that IQ part of it, right? Now, this is one way of putting it, right? You have agents basically as task solvers waiting for context. Context, surfaces from your larger corpus of information asset that resides in a company, but somebody has to give shape to it. The IQ layer actually gives shape to your data, because typically in the world of data warehousing, right, we look at OLAP. OLAP was largely in terms of modeling data to be a lot more inference friendly. The same fundamentals here also, right? Now, the reality is, as Microsoft, we offer the intelligent platform wherein we bring in the intelligence layer, which is basically the heartbeat of your company, which will help you safeguard that IQ. The bigger debate on global stage is, when you rent a model, you rent a model for sure, but you're not renting a model because IQ resides there. No, these models come with high IQ, high EQ, action quotient, etc. But you know what? The true context is enterprise IQ, right? Now we talk about techniques to basically optimize model for enterprise usage. We all know, by the way, any model you're renting today, they're not specialists, they're generalists, right? You need to basically make them a specialist, and there are techniques to make them a specialist, and that's where your IQ comes in, right? Let's look at this. This is largely perceived to be an enterprise learning loop, right? Of course, the term that we get to hear these days, this is not a new term. Hill climbing is a technique in machine learning where you incrementally make the model better with each passing day. It's hill climbing. It's trying to find local maxima and global maxima when it comes to the mathematical equation behind the scenes, right? It's getting better. Now, let's look at when it comes to that enterprise loop, the cognitive loop, how does it actually function? What do we offer as Microsoft? And this is, by the way, a new design thinking in the industry. And we're the first one to make it mainstream. Yes, let's look at this. Now, when it comes to agent, we understand this. Skills, tools, knowledge, and models, that's something which is given. That's why you're manifesting agents today, right? Are you with me? Yeah, wonderful. Now, look, on the peripheral, you basically evaluate these models. By the way, you will not blindly use a model. Just because GPT 5.6 Sol came out, or Luna, or Sora, so you don't just use it. You basically evaluate the model in terms, hey, does this model fit my business needs? Does it answer 100 questions of mine, which is business-centric? If it surpasses that gate, you onboard it. Of course, when agents are performing, you basically also, it leaves traces, right? So you evaluate, you capture traces. Of course, you also give instructions for agents to be steerable. You also provide memory so that it can be personal to you. And of course, eventually, there is security, safety, which is observability that a control plane is available, right? This is largely the peripheral elements of any agent. But the heart of agent's performance would probably reside in what we call as, I would say RLE, reinforcement learning environment. Now, let's double click on this, right? Eventually, this is what helps you do hill climbing, right? Continuous learning. The learning is not happening on the model side, by the way. Learning is happening for the automation. The JD I spoke earlier, right? The JD, the task solver is becoming better, not because new model come in, no. The bigger question is, right, today using GPT 5.6, tomorrow 5.7 comes in. If you replace the model, does veteran knowledge go away from your enterprise? That's a big question. It should not. It should still remain with you just because you switch the model, right? Let's look at this. The agentic system, we saw this. This is largely what is the formation of an agent, right? And of course, what's powering that agent's performance in terms of eventual decisions being made are this pluggable model. I'm using the term pluggable model because you can unplug and plug new models, right? If you look at a vehicle, you change the tires frequently whenever something goes wrong. Those are the models you change. In fact, there's a wonderful video which happened in probably one of the Middle East countries when they actually turn the car and they drive on two wheels while they're changing the third and fourth wheel, right? Is exactly how your enterprise will function from now on. Without stopping the agent, you should actually switch models, right? Now look, here is the deal. When it comes to optimizing model performance, right? You look at these techniques. Reinforcement learning with human feedback, reinforcement fine-tuning, supervised fine-tuning, or distillation. Today, the larger debate happening globally is model distillation, right? I'm sure all of us have seen that, but here's the deal. When it comes to optimizing models, but what do you optimize, right? Model optimization, we've seen it all these days. Fine-tune a model, update the weight so it becomes a lot more aligned to your business needs. That's not it. Is there a way I can optimize my entire workflow, performance? It's almost like saying agents are self-learners, right? Never happens today, right? Because model is not learning at all. The question you ask today, if it makes a mistake, how do you ensure your agent does not make the same mistake tomorrow. That can only happen if instructions, memory, those are updated frequently in terms of how it should behave, right? Is there a way I can have a RLE environment which will make sure my agentic performance betters each passing day? It can be a model optimization, it can be agentic optimization, or both, right? We did a small experiment recently, I'll talk about that, in terms of how we basically hill climbed a very powerful model, and we brought the same intelligence onto a smaller model. It hill climbed to the same performance of that model, we'll see that. But coming to techniques, see, this is what, if you ask me what is the talk of the town, for enterprise to mature in this world of, I would say, agentic AI, beyond the model, where should you invest? This requires, there is data science involved, but you don't have data scientists at all to do this, right? There are techniques available, which is, by the way, fine-tuning. I mean, this is perceived to be an expensive task, right? All these days, there's a training cost, hosting cost, API cost, and eventual token cost. Nobody wants to do that so far, but now they want to, because you know what? I want to distill knowledge from a large language model into a small language model, right, to perform at the same capacity as a large language model. And again, least latency, you can deploy anywhere, no token tax, etc. in the future. So this is one technique. That means you're teaching models basically in terms of what it should know of your enterprise. First, you're optimizing. Second, of course, is this is the most used technique with human feedback. Reinforcement learning, there's a reward function. You give human feedback to basically make the models better, right? Of course, where are we today, honestly, is can we teach agents on a regular basis where it learns? And by the way, what happens because of that? You move from answer to outcomes. The larger question today is, I don't want to pay for tokens, I want to pay for outcomes, right? When you build an agent, you basically are steering agents towards an outcome, not really looking at answering a question, no. You're giving a reward function, right, for a reinforcement learning environment and saying, you know what, you need to optimize this. This is reality, by the way. If you ask me, where should you invest as the next, hill climbing? I mean, enterprise need to hill climb also, right? That means you as an enterprise should mature in the world of AI. And if you ask me, where should you invest, I would say talent going forward is in making sure you understand these techniques. Understand, is there a way? I mean, this is where your enterprise mode comes in, by the way, beyond the model, right? Because you're taking some of the best models and trying to optimize for your private needs. It's a private model. The learning never goes back to the base model, right? Let's look at that. This is our experiment, by the way, the Innovation Hub. My colleague, Srikantan, did this. This is basically, if you look at the bottom, this is a hill climbing graph, right? So we took a GPT 5.2, no reasoning model, 5.2. We tried to hill climb that GPT 4.1 mini. Look, the performance is not that great. 4.1 mini is a smaller model. The task, by the way, here is supply chain scenario. That means, you know what? It's a fulfillment task. There is inventory needs to be fulfilled, and you need to basically dispatch something to the consumer. Now, what is the least path I can take to travel, so I say save dollars? How should I fulfill this, making sure that I save money, right? So that's a task. If you look at the right-hand side, GPT 5.2 with reasoning, and look at this, O4 mini reasoning model is showing better performance results compared to 5.2 and 80%. By the way, we have only taken 100 samples, not too many samples. In 100 samples, it ran for 22 hours, that RL environment, and it's basically giving me better performance. That means I'm going to basically say, the question is, how do we balance costs? You need to understand when you need to break even. The techniques are available today. You need to understand, will I pay only for tokens? I'll do a RAG all the time. Or, I will hill climb a model, a cheaper model showing promise of the high cost model in terms of performance. That's the future, right? This is a few, I would say, visuals for you, but let's look at this. This is the scenario I said, right? A budget given to AI to fulfill a supply chain scenario in terms of inventory. And if you look at right now, by the way, we also used supervised fine-tuning, right? Technique called low-ranking adaptation. You basically update the weights, freeze the larger knowledge base there. So if you look at SFT, largely we talk about giving instructions, rule-based, right? This is what you're supposed to do. There is a known pattern in supervised fine-tuning. Of course, we want to basically make AI adaptable, intelligent. I'm going to give you an outcome. I'll reward you if you go towards the outcome with least time and least dollars consumed. That's what the model has done for us, right? Let's move forward. Now, you'll see in a few seconds that when it comes to the scenario, which is how do you dispatch a specific item to consumer, and if the item is not available, you have to upsell something else or replace something else, right? Look at the left-hand side. Of course, while there is a reward function there, but it probably took more dollars when it comes to, let's say, a second order. Right-hand side, you'll see that it took less number of dollars. This is a power of reinforcement fine-tuning, by the way, right? Where it looks at reward function, makes sure it optimizes operations, keeping in mind outcome, right? These techniques have evolved. They're mainstream right now. They're not something which is very niche. No, these are becoming mainstream right now. If you look at reinforcement learning environment, it's available for you where you can actually, hand off your workflow, which is automation, the data, the skills, the tool calling, all the stuff is, largely managed by environment, and the model should not hold your veteran knowledge. If you remove the model and replace something else, the entire agentic harness continues to be meaningful. That's where enterprise mode is, by the way, right? Now, this is, if you ask me, hey, Sandeep, all the stuff is great, but where should I invest my time from here on? You know what? These are 5 C's, right? You should definitely invest in private evals. You know what? Let's take yesterday, as Microsoft released the latest version of MAI Cyber, right? Which is our cyber safety model from Microsoft AI. That's part of MDAS, which is multi-model agentic screening harness. Now, we're claiming that this model is top of the table in terms of some of the benchmarks. So if you look at CyberGym benchmark, MDAS is number 1 there. By the way, in your company, you will have your own benchmarking tools that you build. So where does this model stand in your benchmark? So you need to invest in evals. So before you onboard an agent onto your enterprise, I would say, before you onboard a language model onto enterprise, you have to have your own private evals. When will the evals come in? This is all a foundation building blocks before you make reinforcement learning a reality as you go along, because that's the fodder, that's the resources. Invest in private evals. Second, of course, is, honestly, when it comes to techniques, which is, fine-tuning, continuous learning we spoke about, you got to have a handle on that. Because, models keep climbing. It probably promises, more capability, but you know what? There's also token maxing that's happening. Can I take a smaller model? Because I don't need world's knowledge. I just want I want a specialized model who specializes in supply chain only. Why do I care about anything else? Because that's a task on hand, right? So of course, choice. You need to, when it comes to evals, eventually you'll end up having multi-model, because for a task given, for not every task you need a frontier model, right? You might probably want to have less. I would say you can choose an open-based or SLM in a workflow 15 tasks, 10 tasks are handed off by SLM, and last 5 tasks, which are the most important ones, I'll hand off to a frontier model, right? And of course, you need to manage cost, right? Which is where you look at, hey, how do I manage token? Token economics is very critical, right? Beyond a point, do you want to switch to a manual way of working? Why not? If you've already saved so much time, you can tee that off in terms of doing manual, because you max tokens. But future would be you handing off a task to an agent, giving a cost and token usage, and the task has to happen within that. That means the thinking that model does should be controlled, right? Of course, eventually it'll compound output. As a platform provider, yes, we have Microsoft Foundry, which helps you do all of these things, right? Eventually, when it comes to before you release model to outside world, we talk about today, the larger debate is in terms of open weights. Another debate also happens, you need to have a governance body to make sure the model is certified before you put it out, right? Can I do red teaming? Can I do grounding tests? Can I eval the model continuously? All the stuff is, and can I have an environment for continuous learning? All the stuff is given to you by Microsoft Foundry. Foundry is one-stop shop. When I earlier said you'll have to create a job description for your agents and worry less about the platform, this is that platform that gives it harness to make sure you deploy the agent and you back off, because you've given the right guardrails. write instructions, an agent should perform. If something goes wrong, brings human in the loop, right? So with that, I take a pause. I'll be available after this session if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much. I hope this is meaningful. The future is where you rent a model for sure, but the IQ, the enterprise knowledge is what you safeguard, and largely continuous learning loop will make that a reality. Thank you so much.